Hello, my friends. It's Indiana Holmes back for another story time. And we continue with The Maltese Falcon, Chapter 18, The Fall Guy. Spade, with his arms around Bridget O'Shaughnessy, smiled meagerly over her head and said, "Sure, we'll talk." Gutman's bulbs jounced as he took 3 waddling backward steps away from the door. Spade and the girl went in together. The boy and Cairo followed them in. Cairo stopped in the doorway. The boy put away one of his pistols and came close up behind Spade. Spade turned his head far around to look down over his shoulder at the boy and said, "Get away. You're not going to frisk me." The boy said, "Stand still. Shut up." Spade's nostrils went in and out with his breathing. His voice was level. "Get away. Put your paw on me, and I'm going to make use of the gun. Ask your boss if he wants me shot up before we talk." "Never mind, Wilmer," the fat man said. He frowned indulgently at Spade. "You are certainly a most headstrong individual. Well, let's be seated." Spade said, "I told you I didn't like that punk," and took Bridget O'Shaughnessy to the sofa by the window. They sat close together, her head against his left shoulder, his left arm around her shoulders. She had stopped trembling and had stopped panting. The appearance of Gutman and his companions seemed to have robbed her of that freedom of personal movement and emotion that is animal, leaving her alive, conscious, but quiescent as a plant. Gutman lowered himself into the padded rocking chair. Cairo chose the armchair by the table. The boy Wilmer did not sit down. He stood in the doorway where Cairo had stood, letting his one visible pistol hang down at his side, looking under curling lashes at Spade's body. Cairo put his pistol on the table beside him. Spade took off his hat and tossed it on the other side of the sofa. He grinned at Gutman. The looseness of his lower lip and the droop of his upper eyelids combined with the V's of his face to make his grin lewd as a satyr's. "That daughter of yours has a nice belly," he said. "Too nice to be scratched up with pins." Gutman's smile was affable, if a bit oily. The boy in the doorway took a short step forward, raising his pistol as far as his hip. Everybody in the room looked at him. In the dissimilar eyes with which Bridget O'Shaughnessy and Joel Cairo looked at him, there was, oddly, something identically reproving. The boy blushed, drew back his advanced foot, straightened his leg, lowered his pistol, and stood as he stood there before, looking under lashes that hid eyes at Spade's chest. The blush was pale enough and lasted only for an instant, but it was startling on his face that habitually was so cold and composed. Gutman turned his sleek-eyed, fat smile on Spade again. His voice was a suave purring. "Yes, sir. That was a shame. But you must admit that it served its purpose." Spade's brows twitched together. "Anything would have," he said. "Naturally, I wanted to see you as soon as I had the Falcon. Cash customers, why not? I went to Burlingame expecting to run into this sort of meeting. I didn't know you were blundering around half an hour late, trying to get me out of the way so you could find Jacoby again before he found me." Gutman chuckled. His chuckle seemed to hold nothing but satisfaction. "Well, sir," he said, "in any case, here we are having our little meeting, if that's what you wanted." "That's what I wanted. How soon are you ready to make your first payment and take the Falcon off my hands?" Bridget O'Shaughnessy sat up straight and looked at Spade with surprised blue eyes. He patted her shoulder inattentively. His eyes were steady on Gutman's. Gutman's eyes twinkled merrily between sheltering fat puffs. He said, "Well, sir, as to that," and put a hand inside the breast of his coat. Cairo's hands on thighs, leaned forward in his chair, breathing between soft parted lips. His dark eyes had the surface shine of lacquer. They shifted their focus warily from Spade's face to Gutman's, and from Gutman's to Spade's. Gutman repeated, "Well, sir, as to that," and took a white envelope from his pocket. 10 eyes, the boy's now only half obscured by his lashes, looked at the envelope. turning the envelope over. It was in his swollen hands. Gutman studied, for a moment, its blank white front, and then its back, unsealed, with the flap tucked in. He raised his head, smiled amiably, and scaled the envelope at Spade's lap. The envelope, though not bulky, was heavy enough to fly true. It struck the lower part of Spade's chest and dropped down on his thighs. He picked it up deliberately and opened it deliberately, using both hands, having taken his left arm from around the girl. The contents of the envelope were $1,000 bills, smooth and stiff and new. Spade took them out and counted them. There were 10 of them. Spade looked up smiling. He said mildly, "We were talking about more money than this." "Yes, sir, we were," Gutman agreed. "But we were talking then. This is actual money, genuine coin of the realm, sir. With $1 of this, you can buy more than $10 of talk." Silent laughter shook the bulbs. When their commotion stopped, he said more seriously, yet not altogether seriously, "There are more of us to be taken care of now." He moved his twinkling eyes and his fat head to indicate Cairo. "And well, sir, in short, the situation has changed." While Gutman talked, Spade had tapped the edges of the 10 bills into alignment and returned them to their envelope, tucking the flap in over them. Now, with the forearms on his knees, he sat hunched forward, dangling the envelope from the corner, held lightly by a finger and a thumb, down between his legs. His reply to the fat man was careless. "Sure, you're together now, but I've got the Falcon." Joel Cairo spoke, ugly hands grasping the arms of the chair. He leaned forward and said primly in his high-pitched, thin voice, "I shouldn't think it would be necessary to remind you, Mr. Spade, that though you may have the Falcon, we certainly have you." Spade grinned. "I'm trying not to let that worry me," he said. He sat up straight, put the envelope aside on the sofa, and addressed Gutman. "We'll come back to the money later. There's another thing that's got to be taken care of first. We've got to have a fall guy." The fat man frowned without comprehension, but before he could speak, Spade was explaining. "The police have to have a victim, somebody they can stick for those 3 murders. Cairo, speaking in a brittle, excited voice, interrupted Spade. "2! Only 2 murders, Mr. Spade. Thursby undoubtedly killed your partner." "All right," Spade growled. "With difference. What difference does it make? The point is, we've got to feed the police something." Now Gutman broke in, smiling confidently, taking with good-natured assurance, "Well, sir, from what we've seen and heard of you, I don't think we'll have to bother ourselves about that. We can leave the handling of the police to you, all right. You won't need any of our inexpert help." "If that's what you think," Spade said, "you haven't seen or heard enough." "Now come, Mr. Spade. You can't expect us to believe at this late date that you are the least a bit afraid of the police, or you are quite able to handle." Spade snorted with throat and nose. He bent forward, resting his forearms on his knees again, and interrupted Gutman irritably. "I'm not a damn bit afraid of them, and I know how to handle them. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The way to handle them is to toss them a victim, somebody they can hang the works on." "Well, sir, I grant you that's one way of doing it, but—" "But hell," Spade said. "It's the only way." His eyes were hot and earnest under a reddening forehead. The bruise on his temple was liver-colored. "I know what I'm talking about. I've been through it all before, and expect to go through it again. At one time or another, I've had to tell everybody from the Supreme Court down to go to hell, and I've got away with it. I got away with it because I never let myself forget that a day of reckoning was coming. I never forget that when the day of reckoning comes, I want to be all set to march into headquarters, pushing a victim in front of me, saying, 'Here, you chumps, is your criminal,' As long as I can do that, I can put my thumb on my nose and wriggle my fingers. All at the laws in the book. The first time I can't do it, my name's Mud. There hasn't been a first time yet. This isn't going to be one. That's flat. Gutman's eyes flickered and their sleekness became dubious. But he held his other features in their bulbous pink, smiling, complacent cast, and there was nothing of uneasiness in his voice. He said, "That's a system that's got a lot to recommend it, sir. By gad, it has. And if it has in any way practical at this time, I'd be the first to say, stick to it by all means, sir. But this just happens to be a case where it's not possible. That's the way it is with the best of systems. There comes a time when you've got to make exceptions. And a wise man just goes ahead and makes them. Well, sir, that's just the way it is in this case. I don't mind telling you that I think you're being very well paid for making an exception. Now, maybe it will be a little more trouble to you than if you had your victim to hand over to the police, but," he laughed and spread his hands, "you're not a man that's afraid of a little bit of trouble. You know how to handle things, and you know you'll land on your feet in the end, no matter what happens." He pursed his lips, partly closed one eye. "You'll manage that, sir." Spade's eyes lost their warmth. His face was dull and lumpy. "I know what I'm talking about," he said, in a low, consciously patient tone. "This is my city and my game. I could manage to land on my feet sure this time, but the next time I tried to pull over, a fast one, they'd stop me fast and I'd swallow my teeth. Hell, with that, you birds'll be in New York or in Constantinople or someplace. I'm in business here." "But surely," Gutman began, "you can—" "I can't," Spade said earnestly. "I won't. I mean it." He sat up straight. A pleasant smile illuminated his face, erasing its dull lumpishness. He spoke more rapidly, in an agreeable, persuasive tone. "Listen to me, Gutman. I'm telling you what's best for all of us. If we don't give the police a fall guy, it's 10 to 1. They'll sooner or later stumble on information about the Falcon. Then you'll have to duck and cover with it, no matter where you are. And that's not going to help you make a fortune of it. Give them a fall guy, and they'll stop right there." "Well, sir, that's just the point," Gutman replied, and, still only his eyes, was the uneasiness faintly apparent. "Will they stop right there, or won't the fall guy be a fresh clue that was likely as not will lead them to information about the Falcon? And on the other hand, wouldn't you say they were stopped right now? And the best thing for us to do is to leave well enough alone." A forked vein began to swell in Spade's forehead. "Jesus, you don't know what it's all about either," he said in a restrained tone. "They're not asleep, Gutman. They're lying low, waiting. Try to get that. I'm in it up to my neck, and they know it. That's all right as long as I do something when the time comes. But it won't be all right if I don't." His voice became persuasive again. "Listen, Gutman, they've absolutely got to give them a victim. We've got to give them a victim. There's no way out of it. Let's give them the punk." He nodded pleasantly at the boy in the doorway. "He actually did shoot both of them, Thursby and Jacoby, didn't he? Anyway, he's made to order for the part. Let's pin the necessary evidence on him and turn him over to them." The boy in the doorway tightened the corners of his mouth in a way that may have been a smile a minute ago, but not now. Spade's proposal seemed to have had no effect on him. Joel Cairo's dark face was open-mouthed, open-eyed, yellowish and amazed. He breathed through his mouth, his round, effeminate chest rising and falling, while he gaped at Spade. Bridget O'Shaughnessy had moved away from Spade and had twisted herself around on the sofa to stare at him. There was a suggestion of hysterical laughter behind the startled confusion in her face. Gutman remained still and expressionless for a long moment. Then he decided to laugh. He laughed heartily and lengthily, not stopping until his sleek eyes had borrowed merriment from his laughter. When he stopped laughing, he said, "By gad, sir, you're a character, that you are." He took a white handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his eyes. "Yes, sir, there's never telling what you'll do or say next, except that it's bound to be something astonishing." There's nothing funny about it. Spade did not seem offended by the fat man's laughter, nor in any way impressed. He spoke in a manner of one reasoning with a recalcitrant, but not altogether unreasonable friend. "It's our best bet. With him in their hands, the police will—" "But, my dear man," Gutman objected, "can't you see, if I even for a moment thought of doing it? But that's ridiculous, too. I feel towards Wilmer just exactly as if he were my own son. I really do. But if I even for a moment thought of doing what you propose, what in the world do you think would keep Wilmer from telling the police every last detail about the Falcon and all of us?" Spade grinned with stiff lips. "If we had to," he said softly, "we could have him killed resisting arrest, but we won't have to go through all that. Let him talk his head off. I promise you, nobody will do anything about it. That's easy enough to fix." The pink flesh on Gutman's forehead crawled in a frown. He lowered his head, mashing his chins together over his collar, and asked, "How?" Then, with an abruptness that set all his fat bulbs quivering and tumbling against one another, he raised his head, squirmed around to look at the boy, and laughed uproariously. "What do you think of this, Wilmer? It's funny, eh?" The boy's eyes were cold, hazel gleams under his lashes. He said in a low, distinct voice, "Yes, it's funny, the son of a bitch." Spade was talking to Bridget O'Shaughnessy. "How do you feel about it now, Angel? Any better?" "Yes, much better, only—" She reduced her voice until the last words became unintelligible from 2 feet away. "I'm frightened." Don't be," he said carelessly, and put a hand on her gray stockinged knee. "Nothing's very bad going to happen. Want a drink?" "Not now." Her voice sank again. "Be careful, Sam." Spade grinned and looked at Gutman, who was looking at him. The fat man smiled genially, saying nothing for a moment, and then asked, "How?" Spade was stupid. "How what?" The fat man considered more laughter necessary, and in explanation, "Well, sir, if you're really serious about this suggestion of yours, the least you can do in common politeness is I should hear you out. Now, how are you going to go about fixing it so that Wilmer," he paused here to laugh again, "won't be able to do us any harm?" Spade shook his head. "No," he said. "I wouldn't want to take advantage of anybody's politeness, no matter how common, like that. Forget it." The fat man puckered his facial bulbs. "No, come," he protested. "You make me decidedly uncomfortable. I shouldn't have laughed, and I apologize most humbly, sir. I wouldn't want to seem to ridicule anything you suggest. Mr. Spade, regardless of how much I disagreed with you, for you must now know that I have the greatest respect and admiration for your astuteness. Now, mind you, I don't see how this suggestion of yours can be in any way practical, even leaving out the fact that I couldn't feel any different towards Wilmer if he was my own flesh and blood, but I'll consider it a personal favor as well as a sign that you've accepted my apologies, sir, if you'll go ahead and outline the rest of it." "Fair enough," Spade said. "Brian is like most distracted attorneys. He's more interested in how his record will look on paper than anything else. He'd rather drop a doubtful case than try and have it go against him. I don't know that he'll ever deliberately frame anybody he believed innocent, but I can't imagine him letting himself believe them innocent if he could scrape up or twist into shape, proof of their guilt. To be sure of convincing one man, he'll let half a dozen equally guilty accomplices go free, if trying to convict them all might confuse his case. That's the choice we'll give him, and he'll gobble it up. He wouldn't want to know about the Falcon. He'll be tricked pink to persuade himself that anything the punk tells him about it is a lot of chewing gum, an attempt to muddle things up. Leave that in to me. I can show him that if he starts fooling around together, trying to gather up everybody's, he's going to have a tangled case that no jury will be able to make heads or tails of, while if he sticks to the punk, he can get a conviction standing on his head. Gutman wagged his head sideways in a slow, smiling gesture of benign disappointment. "No, sir," he said. "I'm afraid that won't do at all. I don't see how even this district attorney of yours can link Thursby and Jacoby to Wilmer together without having to—" "You don't know district attorneys," Spade told him. "The Thursby angle is easy. He was a gunman, and so's your punk. Brian's already got a theory about that. There'll be no catch there. Well, Christ. They can only hang the punk once. Why try him for Jacoby's murder after he's been convicted of Thursby's? They'll simply close the record by writing it up against him and let him go at that. If it's as likely enough he used the same gun on both, the bullets will match. Everybody will be satisfied." "Yes, but—" Gutman began and stopped to look at the boy. The boy advanced from the doorway, walking stiff-legged with his legs apart, until he was between Gutman and Cairo, almost in the center of the floor. He halted. There, leaning forward slightly from the waist, his shoulders raised towards the front, the pistol in his hand still hung at his side, but his knuckles were white over its grip. His other hand was small and hard in a hard fist down at his other side. The indelible youngness of his face gave an indescribably vicious and inhumane turn to the white-hot hatred and the cold white malevolence in his face. He said to Spade in a voice cramped by passion, "You bastard, get up on your feet and go for the heater." Spade smiled at the boy. His smile was not broad, but his amusement in it seemed genuine and unalloyed. The boy said, "You bastard, get up and I'll shoot it out of you if you've got the guts. I've taken all the writing from you I'm going to take." The amusement in Spade's smile deepened. He looked at Gutman and said, "Young Wild West." His voice matched his smile. "Maybe you ought to tell him that shooting me before you get your hands on the Falcon would be bad for business." Gutman's attempt at a smile was not successful, but he kept the resultant grimace on his mottled face. He licked dry lips with a dry tongue. His voice, too, hoarse and gritty, for the paternally admonishing tone it tried to achieve. Now, Wilmer," he said, "we can't have any of that. You shouldn't let yourself attach so much importance to these things. The boy, not taking his eyes off Spade, spoke in a choked voice out of the side of his mouth. Make him lay off me, then. I'm going to fog him if he keeps this up. There won't be any of that. There won't be anything to stop me from doing it." "Now, Wilmer," Gutman said, and turned to Spade. His face and voice were under control. "Your plan is, sir, as I said in the first place, not all practical." "Let's not say anything more about it." Spade looked from one of them to the other. He had stopped smiling. His face held no expression at all. "I say what I please," he told them. "You certainly do," Gutman said quickly. "And that's one thing that I've always admired in you. But this matter is, as I say, not at all practical, so there's not the least bit of use in discussing it any further, as you can see for yourself." "I can't say for myself," Spade said. "You haven't made me see it, And I don't think you can. He frowned at Gutman. Let's get this straight. Am I wasting time talking to you? I thought this was your show. Should I do my talking to the punk? I know how to do that. No, sir, Gutman replied. You are quite right in dealing with me. Spade said, All right. Now I've got another suggestion. It's not as good as the first, but it's better than nothing. Want to hear it? Most assuredly. Give them Cairo. Cairo hastily picked up his pistol from the table beside him. He held it tight in his lap with both hands. Its muzzle pointed at the floor a little to one side of the sofa. His face had become yellowish again. His black eyes darted their gaze from face to face. The opaqueness of his eyes made them seem flat, two-dimensional. Gutman, looking as if he could not believe what he had heard, asked, Do what? Give the police Cairo. Gutman seemed about to laugh, but he did not laugh. Finally he exclaimed, Well, by gad, sir, in an uncertain tone. It's not as good as giving him the punk, Spade said. Cairo's not a gunman, and he carries a smaller gun than Thursby and Jacoby were shot with. We'll have to go to more trouble in framing him, but that's better than not giving the police anybody. Cairo cried in a voice shrill with indignation. Suppose we give them you, Mr. Spade, or Miss O'Shaughnessy. How about that if you're so set on giving them somebody? Spade smiled at the Levantine and answered him evenly. You people want the Falcon. I've got it. A fall guy is part of the price I'm asking. As for Miss O'Shaughnessy, his dispassionate glance moved to her white, perplexed face and then back to Cairo, and his shoulders rose and fell a fraction of an inch. If you think she can be rigged for the part, I'm perfectly willing to discuss it with you. The girl put her hands to her throat, uttered a short, strangled cry, and moved far away from him. Cairo, his face and body twitching with excitement, exclaimed, You seem to forget that you are not in a position to insist on anything. Spade laughed in a harsh, derisive snort. Gutman said in a voice that tried to make firmness ingratiating, Come now, gentlemen, let's keep our discussion on a friendly basis. But there certainly is, he was addressing Spade, something in what Mr. Cairo says. You must take into consideration the... Like hell I must. Spade flung his words out with brutal sort of carelessness that gave him more weight than could have got from dramatic emphasis or from loudness. If you kill me, how are you going to get the bird? If I know you can't afford to kill me, you have it. How are you going to scare me into giving it to you? Gutman cocked his head to the left and considered these questions. His eyes twinkled between puckered lids. Presently he gave his genial answer. Well, sir, there are other means of persuasion besides killing and threatening to kill. Sure, Spade agreed, but they're not much good unless the threat of death is behind them, to hold the victim down. See what I mean? If you try anything I don't like, I won't stand for it. I'll make it a matter of your having to call it off or kill me, knowing you can't afford to kill me. I see what you mean, Gutman chuckled. That is an attitude, sir, that calls for the most delicate judgment on both sides, because you know, sir, men are likely to forget in the heat of action where their best interest lies and let their emotions carry them away. Spade, too, was all smiling blandness. That's the trick from my side, he said, to make my play strong enough that it ties you up, but yet not to make you mad enough to bump me off against your better judgment. Gutman said fondly, By gad, sir, you are a character. Joel Cairo jumped from his chair and went around to the boy and behind Gutman's chair. He bent over the back of Gutman's chair and, screening his mouth and the fat man's ear with an empty hand, whispered. Gutman listened attentively, shutting his eyes. Spade grinned at Bridget O'Shaughnessy. Her lips smiled feebly in response, but there was no change in her eyes. They did not lose their numb stare. Spade turned to the boy. 2-1. 2-1. They're selling you out, son. The boy did not say anything. A trembling in his knees began to shake the knees of his trousers. Spade addressed Gutman. I hope you're not letting yourself be influenced by the guns these pocket edition desperados are waving. Gutman opened his eyes. Kairos stopped whispering and stood erect behind the fat man's chair. Spade said, I've practiced taking them away from both of them, so there'll be no trouble there. The punk is... In a voice choked horribly by emotion, the boy cried, All right! And jerked his pistol up in front of his chest. Gutman flung a fat hand out to the boy's waist, caught the wrist, and bore it and the gun down, while Gutman's fat body was rising in haste from the rocking chair. Joel Kairos scurried to the boy's other side and grasped his other arm. They wrestled the boy, forcing his arms down, holding them down, while he struggled futilely against them. Words came out of the struggling group, fragments of the boy's incoherent speech. Right, go, bastard, smoke! Gutman's, now, Wilma, repeated many times. Kairos, no, please, don't. And don't do that, Wilma. Wooden-faced, dreamy-eyed, Spade got up from the sofa and went over to the group. The boy, unable to cope with the weight against him, had stopped struggling. Kairos, still holding the boy's arm, stood partly in front of him, talking to him smoothly. Spade pushed Kairos aside gently and drove his left fist against the boy's chin. The boy's head snapped back as far as it could go, while his arms were held, and then came forward. Gutman began a desperate, Here, what? Spade drove his right fist against the boy's chin. Kairos dropped the boy's arm, letting him collapse against Gutman's great round belly. Kairos sprang at Spade, clawing his face with a curved, stiff finger of both hands. Spade drew a breath out and pushed the Levantine away. Kairos sprang at him again. Tears were in Kairos' eyes, and his red lips worked angrily, forming words, but no sound came from between them. Spade laughed and grunted, Jesus, you're a pip, and cuffed the side of Kairos' face with an open hand, knocking him out over against the table. Kairos regained his balance and sprang at Spade a third time. Spade stopped him with both hands held out on long, rigid arms against his face. Kairos, falling to reach Spade's face with his shorter arms, thumped Spade's arms. Stop it, Spade growled. I'll hurt you. Kairos cried, Oh, you big coward! And backed away from him. Spade stopped to pick up Kairos' pistol from the floor. And then the boys. He straightened up, holding his left hand, dangling them from upside down by their trigger guards and his forefingers. Gutman had put the boy in a rocking chair and stood looking at him with troubled eyes and an uncertainly puckered face. Kairos went down on his knees beside the chair and began to chafe one of the boy's limp hands. Spade felt the boy's chin with his fingers. Nothing cracked, he said. We'll spread him on the sofa. He put his right arm under the boy's arm and around his back, and his left forearm under the boy's knees, lifted him without apparent effort, and carried him to the sofa. Bridget O'Shaughnessy got up quickly, and Spade laid the boy there. With his right hand, Spade patted the boy's clothes, found a second pistol, added it to the others in his left hand, and turned back to the sofa. Kairos was already beside the boy's head. Spade clinked the pistols together in his hand and smiled cheerfully at Gutman. Well, he said, there's our fall guy. Gutman's face was gray and his eyes were clouded. He did not look at Spade. He looked at the floor and did not say anything. Spade said, Don't be a damn fool again. You let Kairos whisper to you, and you held the kid while I pasted him. You can't laugh that off, and you're likely to get yourself shot trying to do it. Gutman moved his feet on the rug and said nothing. Spade said, And the other side of it is that you'll either say yes right now, or I'll turn the Falcon and the whole goddamn thing in and turn you in with it. Gutman raised his head and muttered through his teeth, I don't like that, sir. You won't like it, Spade said. Well, the fat man sighed. and made a wry face and replied sadly, "You can have him, sir." Spade said, "That's swell." Chapter 19. The Russian's Hand. The boy lay on his back on the sofa, a small figure that was, except for its breathing, altogether corpse-like to the eye. Joel Cairo sat beside the boy, bending over him, rubbing his cheeks and wrists, smoothing his hair back from his forehead, whispering to him, and peering anxiously down at his white face. Bridget O'Shaughnessy stood in an angle that was made by a table and wall. One of her hands was flat on the table, the other to her breast. She pinched her lower lip between her teeth and glanced furtively at Spade whenever he was not looking at her. When he looked at her, she looked at Cairo and the boy. Gutman's face had lost its troubled cast and was becoming rosy again. He had put his hands in his trouser pockets. He stood facing Spade, watching him without curiosity. Spade, idly jingling his handful of pistols, nodded at Cairo's round back and asked Gutman, "It'll be all right with him." "I don't know," the fat man replied placidly. "That part will have to be strictly up to you, sir." Spade's smile made his V-shaped chin more salient. He said, "Cairo?" The Levantine screwed his dark, anxious face around his shoulder. Spade said, "Let him rest a while. We're going to give him to the police. We ought to get the details fixed before he comes to." Cairo asked bitterly, "Don't you think you've done enough to him without that?" Spade said, "No." Cairo left the sofa and went close to the fat man. "Please don't do this thing, Mr. Gutman. I beg you. You must realize that." Spade interrupted him. "That's settled. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Coming in or getting out?" Though Gutman's smile was a bit sad, even wistful in its way, he nodded his head. "I don't like it either," he told the Levantine, "but we can't help ourselves now. We really can't." Spade asked, "What are you doing, Cairo? In or out?" Cairo wet his lips and turned slowly to the face of Spade. "Suppose," he said, and swallowed, "Can I choose?" "You can," Spade assured him seriously, "but you ought to know that if the answer is out, we'll give you to the police with your boyfriend." "Oh, come, Mr. Spade," Gutman protested. "That is not—" "Like hell. Like hell. We'll have to let him walk out on us," Spade said. "He'll either come in or he'll go out. We can't have a lot of loose ends hanging around." He scowled at Gutman and burst out irritably, "Jesus God, is this the first thing you guys ever stole? You're a fine bunch of lollipops. What are you going to do next? Get down and pray?" He directed his scowl at Cairo. "Well, which?" "You give me no choice." Cairo's narrow shoulders moved in a hopeless shrug. "I come in." "Good," Spade said, and looked at Gutman and Bridget O'Shaughnessy. "Sit down." The girl sat down gingerly on the end of the sofa by the unconscious boy's feet. Gutman returned to the padded rocking chair and Cairo to the armchair. Spade put a handful of pistols on the table and sat on the table corner beside them. He looked at the watch on his wrist and said, 2 o'clock. I can't get the Falcon till daylight, or maybe 8 o'clock. We've got plenty of time to arrange everything." Gutman cleared his throat. "Where is it?" he asked, and then added in haste, "I don't really care, sir. What I had in mind was that it would be best for all are concerned if we did not get out of each other's sight until our business has been transacted." He looked at the sofa and at Spade again sharply. "You have the envelope." Spade shook his head, looking at the sofa and then at the girl. He smiled with his eyes and said, "Miss O'Shaughnessy has it." "Yes, I have it," she murmured, putting a hand inside her coat. "I picked it up." "That's all right. Spade told her. Hang on to it. He addressed Gutman. We won't have to lose sight of each other. I can have the Falcon brought here. That will be excellent, Gutman purred. Then, sir, in exchange for the $10,000 in Wilmer, you will give us the Falcon and in an hour or two of grace, so we won't be in the city when you surrender him to the authorities. You don't have to duck, Spade said. It'll be airtight. That may be, sir, but nevertheless, we'll feel safer well out of the city when Wilmer is being questioned by your district attorney. Suit yourself, Spade said. I can hold him here all day if you want. He began to roll a cigarette. Let's get the details fixed. Why did he shoot Thursby? And why and where and how did he shoot Jacoby? Gutman smiled indulgently, shaking his head and purring. Now come, sir. You can't expect that. We've given you money and Wilmer. That is our part of the agreement. I do expect it, Spade said. He held his lighter to his cigarette. A fall guy is what I asked for, and he's not a fall guy unless he's a cinch to take the fall. Well, to cinch that, I've got to know what's what. He pulled his brows together. What are you bellyaching about? You've not been going and sitting so damn pretty if you'll leave him with an out. Gutman leaned forward and wagged a fat finger at the pistols on the table beside Spade's legs. There's ample evidence for guilt, sir. Both men were shot with those weapons. It's a very simple matter for the police department. Experts to determine that bullets that killed men were fired from those weapons. You know that. You've mentioned it yourself. And that, it seems to me, it's ample proof of his guilt. Maybe, Spade agreed, but the thing's more complicated than that. And I've got to know what happened so that I can be sure the parts that won't fit in are covered up. Cairo's eyes were round and hot. Apparently, you've forgotten that you assured us it would be a very simple affair, Cairo said. He turned his excited dark face to Gutman. You see, I advise you not to do this. I don't think... It doesn't make a damn bit of difference what either of you think, Spade said bluntly. It's too late for that now. And you're in too deep. Why did he kill Thursby? Gutman interlaced his fingers over his belly and rocked his chair. His voice, like his smile, was frankly rueful. You are an uncommonly difficult person to get the best of, he said. I begin to think that we made a mistake in not letting you alone from the very first. By God, I do, sir. Spade moved his hand carelessly. You haven't done so bad. You're staying out of jail, and you're getting the Falcon. What do you want? He put his cigarette in the corner of his mouth and said, around it. Anyhow, you know where you stand now. Why did he kill Thursby? Gutman stopped rocking. Thursby was a notorious killer and Mr. O'Shaughnessy's ally. We knew that removing him in just that manner would make her stop and think that perhaps it would be best to patch up her differences with us after all. Besides, leaving her without so violent a protector. You see, sir, I am being candid with you. Yes, keep it up. You didn't think he might have the Falcon? Gutman shook his head so that his round cheeks wobbled. We didn't think that he had it for a minute, he replied. He smiled benevolently. We had the advantage of knowing Miss O'Shaughnessy far too well for that, while he didn't know then that she had given the Falcon to Captain Jacoby in Hong Kong to be brought over on the Paloma while they took a faster boat. Still, we didn't for a minute think that if only one of them knew where it was, Thursby was the one. Spade nodded thoughtfully and asked, You didn't try to make a deal with him before you gave him the works? Yes, sir, we certainly did. I talked to him myself that night. Wilmer had located him 2 days before and had been trying to follow him to wherever he was meeting Miss O'Shaughnessy. But Thursby was too crafty for that, even if we didn't know he was being watched. So, that night, Wilmer went to his hotel, learned he wasn't in, and waited outside for him. I suppose Thursby returned immediately after killing your partner. Be that as it may, Wilmer brought him to see me. We could do nothing with him. He was quite determinedly loyal to Miss O'Shaughnessy. Well, sir, Wilmer followed him back to his hotel and did what he did. Spade thought for a moment. That sounds all right. Now, Jacoby. Gutman looked at Spade with grave eyes and said, Captain Jacoby's death was entirely Miss O'Shaughnessy's fault. The girl gasped, "Oh!" and put a hand to her mouth. Spade's voice was heavy and even. "Never mind that now. Tell me what happened." After a shrewd look at Spade, Gutman smiled. "Just as you say, sir," he said. "Well, Cairo, as you know, got in touch with me and sent for him. After he left police headquarters that night, or morning, he was up here. He, or I should say we, recognized the mutual advantage of pooling forces. He directed his smile to the Levantine. Mr. Cairo is a man of nice judgment. The Paloma was his thought. He saw the notice of its arrival in the papers that morning and remembered that he had heard in Hong Kong that Jacoby and Miss O'Shaughnessy had been seen together. That was when he had been trying to find her there, and he thought at first that she might be on the Paloma, though later he learned she hadn't. Well, sir, when he saw the notice of arrival in the paper, he guessed just what had happened. She had given the bird to Jacoby to bring it here for her. Jacoby did not know what it was, of course. Miss O'Shaughnessy is too discreet for that." He beamed at the girl, rocked in his chair twice, and went on. "Mr. Cairo and Wilmer and I went to call on Captain Jacoby, and were fortunate enough to arrive while Miss O'Shaughnessy was there. In many ways it was a difficult conference, but finally, by midnight we had persuaded Miss O'Shaughnessy to come to terms, or so we thought. We then left the boat and set out for my hotel, where I was to pay Miss O'Shaughnessy and receive the bird. Well, sir, we mere men should have known better than to suppose ourselves capable of coping with her. En route, she had Captain Jacoby and the Falcon slipped completely through our fingers. We laughed merrily. By gad, sir, it was neatly done." Spade looked at the girl. Her eyes, large and dark with pleading, met his. He asked Gutman, "You touched off the boat before you left?" "Not intentionally, no, sir," the fat man replied, "though I dare say we, or Wilmer at least, were responsible for the fire. He had been out trying to find the Falcon, while the rest of us were talking in the cabin, and no doubt was careless with matches." "That's fine," Spade said. "If any slip-up makes it necessary for us to try him for Jacoby's murder, we can also hang an arson rap on him. All right? Now that's about the shooting. Well, sir, we dashed around the city all day, trying to find them, and we found them late in the afternoon. We weren't sure at first that we'd found them. All we were sure of was that we found Miss O'Shaughnessy's apartment. But when we listened at the door, we heard them moving around inside. We were pretty confident that we had them and rang the bell. When she asked us who we were, we told her. Through the door, we heard a window going up. We knew what that meant, of course. So Wilmer hurried downstairs fast as he could and round the rear of the building to cover the fire escape. And When he turned into the alley, he ran right plumb smack into Captain Jacoby, running away with the Falcon under his arm. That was a difficult situation to handle, but Wilmer did every bit as well as he could. He shot Jacoby more than once, but Jacoby was too tough to either fall or drop the Falcon, and he was too close for Wilmer to keep out of the way. He knocked Wilmer down and ran, and this was in broad daylight. You understand, in the afternoon. When Wilmer got up, he could see a policeman coming from the back of the block below, so he had to give up. He dodged into the open back door of a building next to the Coronet, through into the street, and then up to join us. The very fortunate he was, sir, to make it without being seen. Well, sir, there we were, stumped again. Miss O'Shaughnessy had opened the door for Mr. Cairo and me after she had shut the window behind Jacoby, and he broke off to smile at a memory. We persuaded, that is the word, sir, persuaded her to tell us that what she had told Jacoby, and where she had told Jacoby to take the Falcon to you. It seemed very unlikely that he'd live to go that far, even if the police didn't pick him up. But that was the only chance we had, sir. And so, once more, we persuaded Miss O'Shaughnessy to give us a little assistance. We, persuaded her to phone your office in an attempt to draw you away before Jacoby got there, and we sent Wilmer after him. Unfortunately, it had taken us too long to decide and to persuade Miss O'Shaughnessy too. The boy on the sofa groaned and rolled over on his side. His eyes opened and closed several times. The girl stood up and moved into a single side angle of the table and wall again. Cooperate with us, Gutman concluded hurriedly. And so you had the Falcon before we could reach you. The boy put one foot on the floor and raised himself on an elbow, opened his eyes wide and put the other foot down, sat up and looked around. When his eyes focused on Spade, bewilderment went out of them. Cairo left the armchair and went over to the boy. He put his arm on the boy's shoulders and started to say something. The boy rose quickly to his feet, shaking Cairo's arm. He glanced around the room once, and then fixed his eyes on Spade again. His face was set hard, and he held his body so tense that it seemed drawn in the shrunken. Spade, sitting on the corner of the table, swinging his legs carelessly, said, "Now listen, kid. If you come over here and start cutting up, I'm going to kick you in the face. Sit down and shut up and behave, and you'll last longer." The boy looked at Gutman. Gutman smiled benignly at him and said, "Well, Wilmer, I'm sorry indeed to lose you, and I want you to know that I couldn't be any fonder of you than if you were my own son. But, well, by gad, if you lose a son, it's possible to get another, and there's only one Maltese Falcon." Spade laughed. Cairo moved over and whispered in the boy's ear. The boy, keeping his cold eyes on Gutman's face, sat down on the sofa again. The Levantine sat beside him. Gutman sighed and did not affect the banality of his smile. He said to Spade, When you're young, you simply don't understand things." Cairo had an arm around the boy's shoulder again and was whispering to him. Spade grinned at Gutman and addressed Bridget O'Shaughnessy. "I think it'll be swell if you'd see what you can find us to eat in the kitchen, with plenty of coffee, will you? I don't like to leave my guests." "Surely," she said in a startled voice towards the door. Gutman stopped rocking. "Just a moment, my dear." He held up a thick hand. "Hadn't you better leave the envelope here? You don't want to get grease spots on it." The girl's eyes questioned Spade's. He said in an indifferent tone, "It's still his." She put her hand inside her coat, took out the envelope, and gave it to Spade. Spade tossed it into the Gutman's lap, saying, "Sit on it if you're afraid of losing it." "You misunderstand me," Gutman replied suavely. "It's not about all that, but business should be transacted in a businesslike manner." He opened the flap of the envelope, took out the $1,000 bills, counted them, and chuckled so that his belly bounced. For instance, there are only 9 bills here now. He spread them out on his fat knees and thighs. There were 10 when I handed it to you, as you are very well aware of. His smile was broad and jovial and triumphant. Spade looked at Bridget O'Shaughnessy and asked, "Well?" She shook her head sideways with emphasis. She did not say anything, though her lips moved slightly, as if she had tried to. Her face was frightened. Spade held his hand out to Gutman and the fat man to put the money into it. Spade counted the money, 9 $1,000 bills, and returned it to Gutman. Then Spade stood up face to face. His face was dull and placid. He picked up 3 pistols on the table. He spoke in a matter-of-fact voice. "I want you to know about this. We," he nodded to the girl, but without looking at her, "are going in the bathroom. The door will be open, and I'll be facing it. Unless you want a 3-story drop, there's no way out, except past the bathroom door. Don't try to make it." "Really, sir," Gutman protested, "it's not necessary, and certainly not very courteous of you to threaten us in this manner. You must know that we've not the least desire to leave." "I know a lot when I'm through." Spade was patient but resolute. "This trick upsets things. I've got to find the answer, and it won't take long." He touched the girl's elbow. "Come on." In the bathroom, Bridget O'Shaughnessy found words. She put her hands flat on Spade's chest and her face close and whispered, "I did not take that bill, Sam." "I don't think you did," he said, "but I've got to know. Take your clothes off." You won't take my word for it?" "No, take your clothes off." "I won't." "All right, we'll go back in the other room and I'll have them take them off." She stepped backward with a hand to her mouth. Her eyes were round and horrified. "You would?" she asked through frightened fingers. "I will," he said. "I've got to know what happened to the bill, and I'm not going to be held up by anybody's maidenly modesty." "Oh, it isn't that." She came close to him and put her hands on her chest. "I'm not ashamed to be naked before you, but can't you see? Not like this. Can't you see that if you make me, you'll be killing something?" He raised his voice. "I don't know anything about that. I've got to know what happened to the bill. Take them off." She looked at his unblinking yellow-gray eyes, and her face became pink and then white again. She drew herself up tall and began to undress. He sat down on the side of the bathroom, watching as she began to undress. No sound came from the living room. She removed her clothes swiftly, without fumbling, letting them fall down on the floor around her feet. When she was naked, she stepped back from her clothing and stood looking at him. In her mane was pride, without defiance or embarrassment. He put his pistols on the toilet seat and, facing the door, went down on one knee in front of her garments. He picked up each piece and examined it with fingers as well as eyes. He did not find the $1,000 bill. When he had finished, he stood up holding her clothes out and holding them to her. "Thanks," he said. "Now I know." She took the clothes from him. She did not say anything. He picked up the pistols. He shut the bathroom door behind him and went into the living room. Gutman smiled amiably at him from the rocking chair. "Find it?" he asked. Cairo, sitting beside the boy on the sofa, looked at Spade with questioning, opaque eyes. The boy did not look up. He was leaning forward, head between his hands, elbow on his knees, staring at the floor between his feet. Spade told Gutman, "No, I didn't find it. You palmed it." The fat man chuckled. "I palmed it?" "Yes," Spade said, jingling the pistols in his hand. "Do you want to say so, or do you want to stand for a frisk?" "Stand for?" "You're going to admit it," Spade said, "or I'm going to search you. There's no other way. There's no third way, and there's the hard way." Gutman looked up at Spade's hard face and laughed outright. By gad, sir, I believe you would. I really do. You're a character, sir, if you don't mind my saying so. You palmed it, Spade said. Yes, sir, that I did. The fat man took the crumpled bill from his vest pocket, smoothed it on a wide thigh, took the envelope from the 9 bills from his coat pocket, and put the smoothed bill in with the others. I must have my little joke every now and then, and I was curious to know what you would do in a situation of that sort. I must say that you passed the test with flying colors, sir. It never occurred to me that you'd hit on such a simple and direct way of getting to the truth. Spade sneered at him without bitterness. That's the kind of thing I'd expect from somebody else's punk. Some punk younger than you, not somebody as old and wise as you. Gutman chuckled. Bridget O'Shaughnessy, dressed again except for the coat and hat, came out of the bathroom, took a step towards the living room, turned around, went to the kitchen, and turned on the light. Cairo edged closer to the boy on the sofa and began whispering in his ear again. The boy shrugged irritably. Spade looked at the pistols in his hand and then at Gutman, went out into the passageway to the closet there. He opened the door, put the pistols inside on top of a trunk, shut the door, locked it, and then put the key in his trouser pockets, and then went to the kitchen door. Bridget O'Shaughnessy was filling an aluminum percolator. Find everything? Spade asked. Yes, she replied in a cool voice, not raising her head. Then she set the percolator aside and came to the door. She blushed, and her eyes were large and moist and chiding. You shouldn't have done that to me, Sam, she said softly. I had to find out, Angel. He bent down, kissed her mouth lightly, and returned to the living room. Gutman smiled at Spade and offered him the white envelope, saying, This will soon be yours. You might as well take it now. Spade did not take it. He sat in the armchair and said, There's plenty of time for that. We haven't done enough talking about the money end. I ought to have more than $10,000. Gutman said, $10,000 is a lot of money. Spade said, You're quoting me, but it's not all the money in the world. No, sir, it's not. I grant you that. But it's a lot of money to be picked up in a few days and easily as you're getting it. You think it's been so damn easy? Spade asked and shrugged. Well, maybe, but that's my business. It certainly is, the fat man agreed. He screwed up his eyes, moved his head to indicate the kitchen, and lowered his voice. Are you sharing her? Spade said, That's my business too. It certainly is, the fat man agreed once more. But, he hesitated, I'd like to give you a word of advice. Go ahead. If you don't, I dare you'll give her some money in any event, but if you don't, give her as much as she thinks she ought to have. My word of advice is, be careful. Spade's eyes held a mocking light. He asked, Bad? Bad, the fat man replied. Spade grinned and began to roll a cigarette. Cairo, still muttering in the boy's ear, had to put his arm around the boy's shoulder again. Suddenly, the boy pushed his arm away and turned on the sofa to face the Levantine. The boy's face held disgust and anger. He made a fist of one of his hands and struck Cairo's mouth with it. Cairo cried out as a woman might have cried out and drew back to the very end of the sofa. He took a silk handkerchief from the pocket and put it to his mouth. It came away with a daub of blood. He put it to his mouth once more and looked reproachfully at the boy. The boy snarled, Keep away from me, and put his face between his hands again. Cairo's handkerchief released the fragrance of sapphire in the room. Cairo's cry had brought Bridget O'Shaughnessy to the door. Spade, grinning, jerked a thumb at the sofa and told her, The course of true love. How's the food coming along? It's coming, she said and went back in the kitchen. Spade lighted a cigarette and addressed Gutman. Let's talk money. Willingly, sir, with all my heart, the fat man replied. But I might as well tell you frankly right now that 10,000 is every cent I can raise. Spade exhaled smoke. I ought to have 20. I wish you could. I'd give it to you. Gladly I'd give it to you. But $10,000 is every cent I can manage, on my word of honor. Of course, sir, you understand that it is simply the first payment. Later. Spade laughed. I know you'll give me millions later, he said, but let's stick to the first payment now. 15,000. Gutman smiled and frowned and shook his head. Mr. Spade, I've told you, frankly and candidly, and on my word of honor, as a gentleman, that $10,000 is all the money I've got. Every penny, and that's all I can raise. But you didn't say positively. Gutman laughed and said, Positively. Spade said gloomily, That's not good. It's not good enough. But if it's the best you can do, give it to me. Gutman handed the envelope. Spade counted the bills and was putting them in his pocket when Bridget O'Shaughnessy came in carrying a tray. The boy would not eat. Cairo took a cup of coffee. The girl, Gutman, and Spade ate scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, marmalade. She passed around the tray that she had prepared and drank 2 cups of coffee apiece. Then they settled down to wait the rest of the night through. Gutman smoked a cigar and read the book Celebrated Criminal Cases of America, now and then chuckling over or commenting on parts of the contents that amused him. Cairo nursed his mouth and sulked on his end of the sofa. The boy sat at the head of the sofa with his hands over his face until about 4 o'clock. Then he lay down, feet towards Cairo, turned his face to the window, and went to sleep. Bridget O'Shaughnessy, in the armchair, dozed, listened to the fat man's comments, and then carried on wide-spaced, desultory conversation with Spade. Spade rolled and smoked cigarettes and moved, without fidgeting or nervousness, around the room. He sat sometimes on the arm of the girl's chair and on the table at the corner of the floor at her feet. On a straight-backed chair, he was wide awake, cheerful, and full of vigor. At 5:30, he went into the kitchen and made some more coffee. Half an hour later, the boy stirred, awakened, and sat up yawning. Gutman looked at his watch and questioned Spade. Can you get it now? Give me another hour. Gutman nodded and went back to his book. At 7 o'clock, Spade went to the telephone and called Effie Perrine's number. Hello, Mrs. Perrine? This is Mr. Spade. Will you let me talk to Effie, please? Yes, it is. Thanks. He whistled 2 lines of In Cuba softly. Hello, Angel. Sorry to get you up. Yes, very. Here's the plot. In our Holland box at the post office, you'll find an envelope addressed in my scribble. There's a Pickwick Stage parcel room. Check in it for a bundle we got yesterday. Will you get the bundle and bring it to me, PDQ? Yes, I'm home. That's the girl. Hustle. Bye. The street door bell rang at 10 minutes of 8. Spade went to the telephone box and pressed the button. That released the lock. Gutman put down the book, rose smiling. You don't mind if I go to the door with you? He asked. Okay, Spade told him. Gutman followed him to the corridor door. Spade opened it. Presently, Effie Perrine, carrying the brown wrapped paper parcel, came from the elevator. Her boyish face was gay and bright, and she came forward quickly, almost trotting. After one glance, she did not look at Gutman. She smiled at Spade and gave him the parcel. He took it, saying, Thanks a lot, lady. I'm sorry to spoil your day of rest, but this... It's not the first one you spoiled, she replied, laughing, and then, when it was apparent he was not going to invite her in, asked, Anything else? He shook his head. No thanks. She said bye-bye and went back to the elevator. Spade shut the door and carried the parcel into the living room. Gutman's face was red and his cheeks quivered. Cairo and Bridget O'Shaughnessy came to the table as Spade put the parcel down. They were excited. The boy rose, pale and tense, but he remained by the sofa, staring under the curling lashes at the others. Spade stepped back from the table, saying, There you are. Gutman's fat fingers made short work of the cord and the paper and Excelsior, and had the blackbird in his hands, washing his eyes over it. "Ah," he said huskily. "Now, after 17 years." His eyes were moist. Cairo licked his lips and worked his hands together. The girl's lower lip was between her teeth. She and Cairo, like Gutman and like Spade and the boy, were breathing heavily. The air in the room was chilly and stale and thick with tobacco smoke. Gutman set the bird down on the table again and fumbled at a pocket. "It is," he said, "but we'll make sure." Sweat glistened on his round cheeks. His fingers twitched as he took out a gold pocket knife and opened it. Cairo and the girl stood close to him, one on either side. Spade stood back a little, where he could watch the boy as well as the group at the table. Gutman turned the bird upside down and scraped an edge of its base with his knife. Black enamel came off in tiny curls, exposing blackened metal beneath. Gutman's knife blade bit into the metal, turning back a thin, curved shaving. The inside of the shaving and the narrow plane its removal had left had a soft gray sheen of lead. Gutman's breath hissed between teeth. His face became rigid and hot. He twisted the bird around and hacked at its head. There, too, the edge of his knife bared lead. He let the knife and the bird bang down on the table, where he wheeled to confront Spade. "It's a fake," he said hoarsely. Spade's face had become somber. His nod was slow, but there was no slowness in his hand going to catch Bridget O'Shaughnessy's wrist. He pulled her to him and grasped her chin with his other hand, raising her face roughly. "All right," he growled into her face. "You've had your little joke. Now tell us about it." She cried, "No, Sam, no. That is the one I got from Kimidov, I swear." Joel Cairo thrust himself between Spade and Gutman and began to emit words in a shrill, sputtering stream. "That is it? That is it? It was the Russian? I should have known. What a fool we thought him, and fools he made of us." Tears ran down the Levantines' cheeks, and he danced up and down. "You bungled it," he screamed at Gutman. "You and your stupid attempt to buy it from him. You fat fool. You let him know it was valuable, and he found out how valuable and made a duplicate for us. No wonder we had so little trouble stealing it. No wonder it was so willing to send me off into the world and look for it. You imbecile, you bloated idiot." He put his hands to his face and blubbered. Gutman's jaw jagged. He blinked his vacant eyes. Then he shook himself, and by the time his bulbs had stopped, he again was a jovial fat man. "Come, sir," he said good-naturedly. "There is no need of going on like that. Everybody errs at times, and you may be assured that this is every bit as severe a blow to me as anyone else. Yes, that is the Russian's hand. There is no doubt of it. Well, sir, what do you suggest? Shall we stand here and shed tears and call each other names, or shall we—" He paused, and his smile was a cherub's. "Go to Constantinople." Cairo took his hands from his face, and his eyes bulged. He stammered, "You are—" Amazement, coming with full comprehension, made him speechless. Gutman patted his fat hands together. His eyes twinkled. His voice was complacent and throaty, purring. "For 17 years I have watched that little item, and have been trying to get it. If I must spend another year on the quest, well, sir, that will be an additional expenditure in time, if only." His lips moved silently as he calculated. 5 15/17%. The Levantine giggled and cried, "I will go with you." Spade suddenly released the girl's wrist and looked around the room. The boy was not there. Spade went into the passageway. The corridor door stood open. Spade, a dissatisfied mouth, shut the door and returned to the living room. He leaned against the doorframe and looked at Gutman and Cairo. He looked at Gutman for a long time, sourly. Then he spoke mimicking at the fat man's throaty purr. "Well, sir, I must say, you've had a swell lot of thieves about you, aren't you?" Gutman chuckled. "We've little enough to boast about, and that's a fact, sir," he said. "But, well, we're done, and none of us dead yet, and that's not a bit of use thinking of the world's coming to an end just because we've run into a little setback." He brought his left hand from behind him and held it out toward Spade's pink, smooth, hilly palm up. "I'll have to ask you for that envelope, sir." Spade did not move. His face was wooden. He said, "I held up my end. You got the dingus. It's your hard luck, not mine, that it wasn't what you wanted." "Now, come, sir," Gutman said persuasively. "We've all failed, and there's no reason for expecting any one of us to bear the brunt of all of it, and—" He brought his right hand from behind him. In the hand was a small pistol, an ornately engraved and inlaid affair of silver and gold and mother of pearl. In short, sir, I must ask you to return my $10,000. Spade's face did not change. He shrugged and took the envelope from his pocket. He started to hold it out to Gutman, hesitated, opened the envelope, and took out a $1,000 bill. He put that bill into his trouser pocket. He tucked the envelope's flap over on the other bills and held them out to Gutman. "That'll take care of my time and expenses," he said. Gutman, after a little pause, imitated Spade's shrug and accepted the envelope. He said, "Now, sir, we will say goodbye to you, unless—" The fat man's puffed around, his eyes crinkled. "You are to undertake the Constantinople expedition with us. You don't. Well, sir, frankly, I'd like to have you along. You're a man of my liking, a man of many resources and judgment. Nice judgment, if I must say so, because we know you're a man of nice judgment, and we know we can say goodbye with every assurance that you'll hold the details of our little enterprise in confidence. We know we can count on you to appreciate the fact that, as the situation now stands, any legal difficulties that come to us in connection with these last few days would likewise and equally come to you and the charming Miss O'Shaughnessy. You're too shrewd not to recognize that, sir, I am sure." "I understand that," Spade replied. "I was sure you would. I'm also sure that now there's no alternative, you'll somehow manage the police without a fall guy." "I'll make out all right," Spade replied. "I was sure you would. Well, sir, the shortest farewells are the best. Adieu." He made a portly bow. "And to you, Miss O'Shaughnessy, adieu. I leave you the rara avis on the table as a little memento." And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 19 and a beginning to the end of our little tale of the Maltese Falcon. But it's not over yet, so we shall continue this tomorrow. Thank you for joining me. This has been Indiana Holmes. Love to you all.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.